Welcome to Practicing Life Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Pitzer. And to all of my beautiful friends that are in relationships that feel like a merry-go-round, I am talking to you today. So I want to talk about those relationships that you're in that feel like you're dealing with somebody who's Jekyll and Hyde. One moment they're loving and kind and compassionate and everything you want them to be. And then the next minute they are difficult to deal with. It can be combative, argumentative, explosive in their anger. Now, when I speak today, I'm going to be speaking a lot from my experience with my marriage. So if I reference a male, it is only because I am a lot of times thinking about or recalling a memory in my own marriage. But this type of relationship exists in any form. So it doesn't matter what gender you are or who you are dealing with, whether it is like a female to female relationship, male to male, female to male, it doesn't matter. This can apply to any type of relationship. So we're talking about a Jekyll and Hyde relationship, and I am targeting more of your romantic relationships. So what is it? Well, it is being a relationship when you feel that the person that you are in love with and enjoy being around can kind of flip a switch, and they can be a person that you feel kind of scared to be around or intimidated or just want to get away from, right? So in these types of relationship, you can be bouncing back and forth on a different timeline, we'll say, because sometimes this can be, you can be in a relationship where someone is just ideal for you for 6 months, and then all of a sudden have, like, we'll call it an episode where you see the reverse side of it and you're dealing with somebody that is difficult, right? So in these type of relationships, you are uncertain who you're going to get. And often you are, whether you are consciously or unconsciously aware of it, you are looking for signs of them being triggered. So in this type of relationship, what I find and what I know to be true for my own self is that you fall in love with the person that is, charismatic and is supportive and loving and kind and compassion. And often this happens from your first impression of this person. So when you first meet this person is who you've always been looking for, is what you've always wanted. Everything is just right. It's just perfect. And this imprints your brain. So from the subconscious part of how your brain works, you now have a first generalized pattern of behavior that you accept and anticipate from this person. And that's really key. Okay. So I'm talking to you as a hypnotist right now. This first impression dramatically affects the rest of your relationship because it is what you will most likely hold on to. It's the very first imprint in your brain. It will be your default and your go-to. Then you have this other side of the personality that comes in that is icky to deal with, is difficult to deal with. And what is really common on this side of things is that there's always a valid reason or a justification for this person's behavior. And often you have a relationship where one person has just a very gentle, compassionate soul, and you have another person that can be a little rough around the edges, right? So that compassion person often gets sucked in to relating to their struggle, and there's a lot of forgiveness given. So in this type of relationship, when you see the worst side of the person, your subconscious brain, has that imprint of what they are, who they are, because that was your first impression of them. And then B, you also are such a compassionate, forgiving person, and you can relate to someone having a bad day or going through a struggle or being under so much stress and reacting poorly. So these are the two common things that happen in these type of relationships that keep them going and going. there's some common things that I see, common beliefs that I see, that you believe that this person that you are with is a loving person. You already have evidence and proof of that. Your brain, your subconscious has been imprinted to see that. If you met that person when they were behaving cruelly or being very agitated, that would have been your first impression. And that person, if they wanted to be in a relationship with you, would have had to work in order to get your love. And they would have had to work really hard to get your love. But that's not typically what happens. What typically happens is they're on their best behavior. They're being that loving, kind person. And maybe they are the majority of the time. And so that's what you are going to hold on to, because that's the first impression that your brain has received. So you have a belief that they are a lovable person. You have proof of it. You see the best in them and you believe in them. So these are some things that you as a person in the relationship are showing up as. And then you have this justification, whether it is them imposing that justification on you, or it's just from your past experiences where you've had people train you in your mindset to think of this as a justification. Like maybe you had a parent that was explosive sometimes, or, a coworker or somebody early on in your life, wouldn't necessarily be a coworker, but you've had some type of training of your brain to say, well, this is okay because. So you might hear in these type of relationships when the person gets set off and they start behaving badly, you might hear something like, well, it's your fault I acted this way. It's your fault that I'm angry because you didn't do the dishes, whatever it may be. All right. And you also have that I have a right to be angry attitude from your partner. I have a right to be angry with you because, right? And in a healthy relationship, let me step back and draw the line between the healthy and the unhealthy relationship. Emotions are meant to be there. Every emotion is a valid emotion and you are meant to feel it. The difference between the healthy and the unhealthy relationship is that in a healthy relationship, the person feels the anger, but they're not directing it towards anybody. I mean, they are doing probably the best they can, depending on how angry they are. They are doing the best that they can to keep their anger in check. And that may not always be possible. And a person may need to say, like, I need 10 minutes or I need a day. They may need more time to process their anger. But in an unhealthy relationship, it is how they behave with their anger that makes it different. They direct the anger at someone. It is as if they want you to know how angry they are. So I'm going to use a metaphor for you. I want you to think about anger as steam. And so the more angry you are, the more steam there is. In a healthy relationship, you see the steam. Let's pretend the steam is, coming from their heart and raising up out of their head and to the ceiling, right? It is directed towards the universe. In an unhealthy relationship, the partner would direct their heart and direct the steam towards you, burning you, hurting you, inflicting, cause pain, whatever you want to phrase it as, right? So in a healthy relationship, you may be angry, but the anger is not directed towards anyone. In an unhealthy relationship, it is as if they're dropping their head and taking that steam and directing it completely towards you and stepping away from the fact of owning their own behavior and how they are using their emotions to manipulate, control, or to get what they want. So this is where I am drawing the distinction for you. Let me know if you have any comments or questions about that. So if someone says it's your fault that I acted this way, they're not taking responsibility for their own actions. Anytime that we get angry, we are always responsible for our behavior and how we treat another person. I can be angry at my spouse, I can be angry at my kids, but in both instances, I am showing them love and respect, even if I'm angry at the same time. That's not always easy. And sometimes I do need a minute. Sometimes I'm breathing, like, just give me a second to breathe. Like, those are natural responses, and it's okay because there's a feeling going on in our body, and managing that takes effort. So, on a primitive level, our brain does two things. It goes towards pleasure and it goes away from pain, right? This is like the very, very basic of your brain. And so these relationships, these Jekyll and Hyde relationships, they get really, really tricky because you can be in love with the person and go towards the pleasure. And at the same time, like fear and hate, the cruel side of this person's personality, and run away from it. And so this gets you in this cycle, this loop. And I'm talking from my own experience as well as a coach. This cycle and this loop, this merry-go-round, it is so draining and rewarding. This going up in emotions and feeling so loved and so secure and safe. And then this crashing of feeling like your whole world is falling apart, this up and down, constant cycle, looping, looping, looping. And people may wonder, why do you stay in this type of relationship? Well, there's a lot of reasons why you stay. And I'm going to list a couple, and this is not all inclusive or any particular order, but you stay because you fear hurting them. You feel hurting them. You feel the hurt of leaving them because you love that one side of this person's personality. Like if it's you love the Hyde, right? Like you love the person that they show up all loving and kind and sweet, and they're everything that you've always wanted or really darn close to it. And you feel so loved and supported. And it's easy to tolerate and ignore the Jekyll side. It's easy to ignore the pain. So you fear hurting them. You feel the hurt of losing that wonderful side of them. There's the fear of unknown. Like, you sometimes get into a codependency relationship, and it's almost like you need this person now in order to function. Like there's just attachment that gets really, really deep. But there's this fear of unknown of what would happen if I left them. So there's that aspect. And even in a healthy relationship, the fear of unknown is going to exist. So let me just say that is literally how your brain works. Anytime you're going to do something different, your brain is going to naturally get into this discomfort of, well, what will happen if I leave this person? Okay, so let's go to you are attached to the good times. This goes back to that imprinting I mentioned at the front of the podcast, this episode. You remember them at their best. You remember the good times. You remember them holding you and laughing and just all of these wonderful memories. And it's really, really hard to let that go. And because that was the first impression and the default, it is often what your brain will see. So, and I'm going to stop for a moment and talk to you about the science of your brain. This is important, even if you don't like science. But I want you to think about this room that I'm in, or envision a room if you're listening. And if you step into, let's say, your bedroom, and the bedroom is dark and you have a flashlight, and that flashlight creates a beam of light for you to be able to see. You can't necessarily see the whole room, but that beam allows you to focus on certain aspects, and you might be able to find your way to the bed or find your way to the bathroom, right? But you can't see everything because there's just not enough light. Well, that beam of light is what your conscious mind is. And the room itself is your subconscious. So your subconscious is the whole aspect of your brain, but your consciousness can only focus on a small bit of information. So from a neurological standpoint, your consciousness can only focus on 1.3 bits of data. The 95% of the room, the rest of the room, the rest of the world, the rest of the experience, your subconscious is taking in. So when you have a relationship where there's Jekyll and Hyde, your consciousness is going to revert back to that first impression, and it's going to focus on what provides its pleasure, and it's going to avoid what causes its pain. So it's going to focus on the good times. It's going to focus on what you want it to focus on, right? So you're taking that flashlight and you're looking at all the good times, and that's really hard to step away from a relationship when you're taking that light and you're focusing on the good times. The bad times really seem less bad at that moment. And so it is hard to leave when you are so attached to those good times. The other thing that gets really tricky about this is every person is different. And so if you were dating somebody who was always, Jackal, and they were always being mean or cruel or whatever, it would be a no-brainer. You would get out of the relationship because there is no reward. There is no pleasure. But that's not how these relationships work. So you can have the Hyde character in your significant other, let's say 80% of the time. And so you're like weighing the odds, like you're analyzing this, because we as a society are often very analytically driven, and we think about things logically before we think about things emotionally. And so logically, you're sitting there and you're thinking about, well, I'm saying he again, your partner is so good, right? They're whatever, they help you with this. They are there for you on this. They, give you gifts. They take you to dinner. You guys laugh so much, right? And so you're holding on to all of those good times, and you're valuing those, you're weighing them as more important than the bad times, because logically, you know that there are going to be bad times, and you've already, in those bad moments, in those fights, or in those difficult moments, you've already trained your brain to justify their behavior. So even if you don't like it, even if you're scared of it, even if you're intimidated by it, you've already justified their behavior in that moment. And so that's stored as the memory. And so you are more likely to tolerate the Jackal side of the personality and hold on to the Hyde personality. The Hyde feels so good. The Jackal is justified. And you may actually believe that you are responsible for somebody's emotions. And this is something that a lot of women, as little girls, were trained to do. And more parents are doing this. It's not just like be a good girl and do this. More and more parents are coming to their child and saying things like, mom or dad isn't happy. You did this. Well, that's training a child to say, okay, I am responsible for my parents' happiness. My behaviors decide whether or not my parents are happy. So that's starting to train your child in the ways of being responsible for someone else's emotions. But the reality is you cannot be responsible for another person's emotions. You can't control their thoughts, their interpretations, their stories, nor how they react. So just to circle back, because we're going to come back to this particular comment, but let's finish talking about why someone stays. So we have the fear of the unknown, fear of hurting the person, fear of the hurting of leaving the relationship. You're attached to the good times. You also have evidence that your partner can be the person that you want to be. And again, you fell in love with that person. So you have the evidence. And then oftentimes there's this thing called love bombing. So this is like when you're getting ready to leave the relationship, or you're expressing your unhappiness, or you're expressing that this isn't working for you. This is when the partner steps in and is like the best Hyde ever. They are giving you exactly what you want. They are giving you what you need. And they are promising you with words and emotions that are very convincing that they are going to do better, that they are going to do something differently, that they're going to do therapy, that next time they're going to control your behavior. And the fact is you want to believe them. And so you do. You want to believe them because you want that pleasure of Hyde. You love that pleasure. Plus, often it is so the love bombing, they call it bombing because it's not just one little thing. It is like a 360 experience. They're hitting you with words, they're hitting you with like all your 5 love languages, right? They're spending time with you, they're buying you things, they're getting you what you want, they're giving you attention, they're giving you just everything possible to keep your attention and your focus on them being that loving, kind, compassionate person. Another reason that you stay is because, typically the person that is receiving this kind of abusive jackal personality is a person who is very loving and supportive and compassionate. And so the partner will appeal and reason to your compassion and to your love and ask for forgiveness. And it gets really confusing. In my own personal experience, I speak from this rawly, from my heart, because I have been in my own 2 feet, standing and looking at my partner, hearing him promise to do better multiple times, like in different circumstances. And it's not just that you want to believe them, it's that in your heart you love them. And there is a thought process that goes on in my head, at least, that I love them. Like, how could I leave them? How could I not forgive them? How could I not like work on this relationship and to continue? This is what I ultimately want, right? So there's this thought process, the story process that goes on of, I love this person. And when you love somebody, you don't leave them, right? So this is my own personal experience, but this is something I see other people leave. Like, I love them. I just can't stand this side. And you disassociate. So as the partner, you're like, yeah, I'm totally in love with Hyde and I disassociate from Jekyll. Like, no, I don't really like this person, this personality trait, but it only happens, like, you're justifying it, you're minimizing it, you're normalizing it. Hear those 3 words again. You're justifying, you're normalizing, and you're minimalizing the Jekyll side of their personality. And so it's very easy to just focus on the Hyde and say, I love this person. I will deal with the Jekyll side. Like, it's worth it to me, right? So those are some of the reasons that you stay. And we have a tendency to tolerate or ignore what we don't want to see. So what happens in these relationships on a general terms is that over time, you start seeing more and more of the Jekyll and less of the Hyde. But still, that first imprint of Hyde was so strong, and it's the first one. And then you hold on to all of those popular moments, all of those good moments, and your flashlight, your consciousness is focused on the good moments. And so you just continue in this relationship for year after year, hoping that they'll change, believing their promises, just waiting and hoping to see more and more of Hyde. And what happens to the person that's, in this type of relationship is they start to feel lost. They start to feel broken. They start to lose like a sense of themselves, and they are often depleted in their energy. There's a loss of trust towards themselves as well as towards their partner, because a lot of times in these type of relationships, there is, like, I'll say, love lost and trust broken. When someone hurts you so badly, that's why the love bombing comes in, because you're hurt and you're so broken and you're so in the down in the dumps. This Hyde personality has to come in full and lively and just overwhelming to pull you out. And that's exactly what they do. And then there's this sense of relief that, my clients feel, that I have felt. There's this sense of relief, and you're like, okay, like, this is over. We're back to good times. Like, I made it through. Right. And so that rebuilding over time gets more and more exhausting, but also you're training your body and your brain once again to accept this as normal. And so it doesn't matter that over time he or she, whoever you're with, becomes more and more frequently in that jackal personality, because you are step by step normalizing it along the way. So even as it gets bigger and bigger, you've normalized it over and over and over. And so it doesn't incrementally feel that much different until you're so depleted and you're so tired and you're so broken. You start to ask yourself, like, whether I should stay or go, like whether or not this is worth it. Like, can I do this? There's some pivotal moment in your relationship where you step back and you're like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. So let's just talk about, first of all, I'm going to say this. It's not my job to tell you whether or not you should stay or go. And I speak a lot about my relationship. So in my relationship, I tolerated it for 20 years. It wasn't that way in the beginning. So let me make that clear. This didn't start to happen until after we had kids and there was more pressure. And for those of you who have not listened to me before, I have 2 kids on the spectrum, and my second kid is a child who needs like 24 caregiving. That puts extra stress and extra pressure on the relationship. But those are considered like life-altering events. And so, the person that I married changed dramatically with having children, especially with our second child, who needs so much care. So much care that as 2 parents, we don't always give ourselves the self-care we need. And this affects us. And in this case, my husband's job was also, he was in a toxic environment that he was acclimating to and becoming like, right? So there's factors that play into all of this. Can you stop and pause? Do you hear how I justify his behavior? Because I'm a compassionate, loving, and forgiving person. But it's also because I see where he's coming from. And this is where I want to stop you, because it's not my job to decide whether you stay or leave. I tolerated it for 20 years, and then I made the decision to leave. After several months of not talking or having any contact, my husband decided, that he was willing to change and do, a program. And we have since worked and gotten back together. So I'm not judging you for wanting to stay. I'm not judging you for thinking about leaving. What I do want to point out is you get to decide what you want and what you are willing to tolerate. And what you tolerate, you promote. And I'm going to tell you from firsthand experience that if you decide to stay, and if your partner does something like my husband does, and they go and they get help and they go through their own transformation, they go through their own transformation to come to a better place, to kind of eliminate jackal, let's say, you're still going to have instances where they revert back to jackal. They're still going to revert back because that's the human experience. That is the brain. There is a pattern in their brain. And the more upset or the more stress or the more pressure or the more things accumulate onto that person without the self-care, it is likely going to happen that they will revert back to that jackal personality. I want you to know that up front right now. This is something they told me to expect. And at the time, I definitely thought, well, it was worth it and I was willing to give it a try. But I mean, I'm telling you that it is not easy to go down this path, because all it is that you're getting more of Hyde again and less of jackal, and you're going to have longer instances. So in my case, my husband can go, let's say, 6 months before he might slip up and revert back into an old pattern. And it can be just really, really minute. It doesn't have to be a large scale. Okay. It can be really minute. And you can go back to your old patterns and your old behaviors of ignoring it, justifying it, minimalizing it. You can revert back to your old behaviors too. So it's really important that you understand the cycle here. I do believe that someone can completely change. And I would say that my husband has completely changed, but that doesn't erase the pattern. So let me put this in a different scope for you. Let's say that a person is an alcoholic and they go and they get treatment, right? They may slip up. That doesn't mean that they will. But the chances of them slipping up does exist. So if they're not getting the help, if they're not getting the self-care, if they're not making all of these changes to be able to permanently walk away from this, if the boundaries for them aren't, if they aren't sticking to their own boundaries, then those are some of the things that you can face. Now, you can do whatever you want to do, but I want you to sit back and ask yourself, like, what does love look like for you? And how often do you want to feel it in that relationship? Is that 100% of the time? Is it 90% of the time? Like, what is it with you? Like, what are you willing to tolerate when this person has like a bad moment? And take a moment to remember that whatever you decide to do, that there is a cost to it. So there's the chance that, like, if the person slides into the back behavior again, that, hey, I realize that that means I'm going to feel really low emotionally. I'm going to feel drained. I'm going to feel tired. I'm going to question, what am I doing? And what's my next step? And how do I take care of myself? And how do I survive? Or whatever the questions are. So whatever you permit is what you promote. And I would also tell you that you have a right to be and feel safe with another person at all times. To me, love means being safe. I would also, in my definition of love, put respect. So you get to decide what's right for you. If you want to come with me, what I do for my clients is I really help them understand themselves. And one of the reasons I do this is because I just want them to feel more empowered. And, if they decide to leave a relationship, that they feel like they can do it in this situation. Because a lot of times people don't leave these type of relationships because they feel like they can't do it on their own. Like they don't know how to, they don't feel like they have the strength. I mean, part of being in these type of relationships is that over time, you're seeing more of the Jekyll and you're getting more beat down and you're feeling more broken. And feeling really broken and beat down and tired and depleted doesn't give you the resources that you need to leave. So I'm not here to help somebody decide whether or not they want to stay or go. That is a personal decision. And I don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong decision, because every person is going to decide what is right for them. Now, I get the love. I get that you love this other person. And I don't talk about the relationships with my clients. I talk about, what do you need to support yourself in this situation? How do you want to transfer this energy, this inner child work that may be needed so that you can feel loved at this moment? What behaviors are you tolerating, and are you okay with that? So if you're in a Jekyll and Hyde relationship, I'm hoping this content helps you and it gives you clarity. And I would just ask you to consider what it is that you're getting out of this relationship in those dark moments. And what is it that you want to do differently? Because those dark moments, as much as we don't like to look at them, they often hold the key to something from our childhood that we may need to look at and address. All right. I'm sending you guys love, and you matter.